Thank you for joining us for our third Cafe Stareable, presented by Dell Technologies, NVIDIA, and Intel. My name is Ajay Kishore, and I'm the founder and CEO of Stareable. For those of you new to us, Stareable Fest is the premier annual indie TV and web series festival in the US, the new home for digital creative talent in the TV industry. Today, we're excited to welcome Mark Sanu, the founder of SavageGeese Media. Mark has lived a number of lives, from healthcare to IT to network security. When faced with a crossroads in his career, he chose to embrace his passion for video, automotive engineering, and technology. This adventure spawned video content that focused on highly technical and less disposable productions. He's built a channel with 500,000 subscribers by creating content that features deep dives with major automotive partners. We're also going to be announcing our Stareable Fest LA 2022 official selections. This is our first year holding Stareable Fest LA, and we're incredibly excited about the expansion. Last year was the biggest year ever for our industry marketplace, featuring 106 meetings taken with industry execs from places like AMC Networks, Macro, MGM, Untitled, Disney, Blumhouse, CNN Originals, Condé Nast, Group 9, Roku, Stampede, Tubi, and Topic. As we see growing demand from our industry partners for access to our incredible community of creators, content, and IP, we thought, what better way than to hold an event in the heart of the global film and TV industry? Stareable Fest LA will also be happening against the backdrop of an exciting new partnership. As many of you know, Stareable is hugely focused on getting the creators in our community access to co-production, development, acquisition, licensing, and distribution deals, which is why we're so excited to announce that we have just licensed 15 of our 2020 official selections to the Roku channel. Over the past couple of years, the Roku channel has built a massive ad-supported streaming service. 60 million monthly users across the US, UK, and Canada. They made waves in 2021 when they jumped into original content by acquiring Quibi's slate of short-form shows. They've already renewed many for second seasons. Now they're licensing our official selections with creators sharing in their industry-leading ad monetization and are interested in funding and producing new seasons of projects that do well with their audience. We expect these projects to be available on the Roku channel within the next month. We've also made the opportunity available to our 2021 selections, and it will also be an opportunity for our new 2022 selections. As we continue to grow Stareable's list of formal industry partners, starting with our first look relationship with AMC Networks last spring, expanding to this deal with Roku, we're seeing the industry sit up and take notice, and we're creating new opportunities as we speak. Stareable Fest is the pipeline between indie digital creators and mainstream Hollywood. We'll be opening for submissions for Stareable Fest New York City 2022 in about a month. We hope you give us the opportunity to review your pilots, short form, and long form series. Don't miss the opportunity to land the conversation that unlocks everything. Thank you again to Dell Technologies, NVIDIA, and Intel for presenting Cafe Stareable. Now I'm excited to bring up our guest, Mark Sanu of SavageGeese Media.
Hey, how you doing?
Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.
So, you've obviously had this incredible career that's featured a lot of different facets. I kind of want to rewind, though. How did you get started down this path?
Well, before I start that, I want to say that I sound way better. You make me sound way better than I really am. That's I don't want to use too many big adjectives, but I also wanted to give a disclaimer that I'm not being paid to be here. This is not a sponsored thing for me. I'm here because I just kind of want to tell the story about, how I got to some of the places I am and potentially help creators or people that are in this space with some of these tips that I've learned along the way. And it's just more to have a little bit of fun. So I just wanted to get that out in the open.
We appreciate you doing that.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. So back to your original question, to kind of cover the bases, the more I go on doing this, the more I realize that a lot of the choices that I've made, and all of the choices that I feel a lot of the people that are making in this industry are really rooted back from early on. Things get baked in from when you're a kid. Those early experiences kind of dictate your decision making and the things you like and don't like. And they subconsciously steer decisions in the background that you don't even think about sometimes. And it's a blessing and a curse. And I think a lot of the place that I've been recently is because of that. And I'm kind of going back to try to understand why I'm doing some of the things I do. And a lot of that comes from being very, very young and having a dad that put me in front of the TV a lot to watch movies. And the earliest memories I've had of watching movies was like when I was 3 or 4 years old.
Oh, wow.
And I know probably he worked a lot, didn't have a lot of time. So he'd come home on the weekends and he'd just like, hey, I'm watching TV, come sit here with me. And so that's the blessing and the curse, because now I see a lot of the world through like a camera almost. And the bad thing about it is, I saw a lot of stuff when I was a kid that I shouldn't have. And I know there's a picture I shared with you guys, but I was big into this movie Flashdance when I was like 4 years old. And I was so much into it that my parents got me a birthday cake, a Flashdance birthday cake. And I didn't really remember this too much. And I've thought about it recently. If you've never seen this movie, it was made in '83. Of course, it's ancient. And it was really a horrible movie. It was just about dancing and break dancing and a girl who was a welder who had a dream of dancing. And no spoilers, but she winds up working at not a strip club, but like a topless dance bar. And this is what I was into at like 4 years old. But she had a heart of gold, and her big thing was she achieved her dream of being a dancer by working hard. So it stuck with me. And obviously I never became a dancer. Unfortunately, I don't have the body for it. But the other things outside of that were these other movies that I saw as a kid. I remember standing in line outside at a theater to see Aliens when it came out in '86. And I remember being with my dad holding his hand, and I was so excited. I don't know why. And he took me to see like a movie that was extremely controversial at the time. I had no idea why. I had no idea what I was going to see. But we went to go see Last Temptation of Christ. And I remember standing outside, and there were protesters outside the theater, like screaming at us for going in. And I had no idea why. I'm just this little kid. But these adult topics, these adult themes, and these movies really were at the core of like my dream was to do video or movies, and I had no idea what that meant. And obviously, living in the Midwest, there's no internet, nothing like that existed. So it was just basically like that Hollywood dream. And I think growing up, I knew it was more of a fantasy than a reality. But my childhood friend's dad worked for Panasonic, and he was constantly traveling to Japan, and he would bring back all these like new pieces of tech that were basically disposable, their video game system. And then he had like their new VHS camcorder that he would just let us play with. And I was like, oh, I can make a movie. And, you realize that's not what it was like. So I was making these stupid like home movies with my friends when I was, probably like 7 to 10 years old. And, I have some of them, and I would never share them out, of course, but that was baked in really early on. But like this picture here that they put up was me. Like I played a lot of sports with my dad, and I always had this huge level of pressure on myself to do better. I always thought I could do better. And whenever I let myself down, I was always disappointed. So it was like there were all these times in my life where I would do things and I realized I wasn't very good at them. And I had this like deep rooted dissatisfaction with, how can I do stuff better? How can I get better at things? And how can I learn as much as possible? And that was really the foundation of like my mindset early on with pretty much everything. Except maybe when I was a teenager, I was pretty lazy.
I mean, I think that's a lot of childhood and adolescence is trying to find things that you're interested in, but also trying to find things that overlap of things that you're interested in and things that you can be good at, right? And I know growing up that that idea of like what could I be felt really, really narrow. And it was only as I got older that I started to realize like, oh, there are so many things in the world. You don't have to kind of limit your opportunities. And I think also that opportunity set has really like changed over the past 20 or 30 years, right? What it means to create video.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't, like as I was getting into my like teenage years, really the best thing I had was like a cheesy camcorder and 2 VCRs to like edit personal projects together. Like I'd make a video and I'd, edit like stop, start on 2 VCRs. And that's how I made my videos for fun. Obviously this wasn't serious, but I knew early on, I'm like, I don't, this isn't going anywhere. It was more just like screwing around. So, I mean, that's kind of how some of that started. And when I was late in high school, my life kind of imploded. My parents moved around. They had a whole bunch of drama, which I'm not going to get into, but I knew that I needed to get out and try to find some stability for myself. And I really didn't know what that was. And you made a good point. Like your worldview is very narrow when you're young, and you only know what you know, and so I knew that to kind of do some of these things I wanted in life, I needed stability. And I sacrificed a lot of the things that I was passionate about for trying to find a place where I would have money, where I would have a roof over my head, where I wasn't scraping by to do stuff. And my first job was I begged this local car dealership. It was this horrible car dealership. They sold like the worst cars. And I'm like, oh, I want to work there. I didn't know why, really. I don't even know why now. I just thought maybe, okay, I could learn how to work on cars or clean cars. I went back probably 10 times to this guy, and he's like, finally just gave me a pity job. And this car that's on the screen, because I didn't have a car, I was walking to work at the time. He's like, oh, my wife delivers mail. She's got a car she's selling. And I'm like, great. And then he brought into work one day after he finally hired me. He's like, you got to have a car. And he sold this thing to me for $500. And I don't even know why he just didn't give it to me for free, but I had to work for this. I had to make monthly or weekly payments of like $50 for whatever it was to pay off $500. And not only that, everything was broken on it. It was literally a rust bucket. And going from there, learning how to work on cars, learning how to fix those things. Like I was fixing my car in the parking lot, fixing it in winter just to get to work. And working on the cars in the dealership, a person would come on a test drive and they'd come back and there was coolant leaking everywhere. They were just absolute junks. And they were so cheap. They're like, just get it, fix it. I'm tired of hearing these customers complain. And that's how I learned how to work on these cars, for right or wrong. I mean, it was just a very interesting experience. But one thing I didn't know, and this is kind of funny, I never really talked about this, but the guy who owned the place also owned like this bar. So I became his slave. He's like, Mark, I need you to come to my bar and paint the bar for me. And he put me on these high ladders and I'd be painting this bar. He's like, I need you to clean the bathroom. So I was no longer doing the job that I got hired for. I was just basically this guy's like assistant to do all the dirty work that he didn't want to do. And one day I came in, he's like, I need you to move my wife's furniture out of this room and bring a truck from the car dealership. And I brought this truck over and I couldn't drive stick. It was a manual trans. It was the first time I'd ever been in a manual trans car. I pulled up, like herky jerky. I had ruined first gear, just getting there, trying to figure it out. The guy saw me back it up out of his driveway. And the next day he fired me. Like he literally fired me. And I came into work. He's like, I don't want you here. Get out. And I talked to the guy who hired me. He's like, yeah, you didn't know how to drive stick. He was so pissed off at you. And that was like that little trophy that you saw where that disappointment. That's how I felt after that. And I vowed, I'm like, I'm never going to be in that spot again. I'm going to learn how to drive stick. I'm going to learn how to make up for these deficiencies. And I don't want to come home feeling like I don't know how I'm going to survive. And that was at that point, I'm like, I made that decision to get into a career like healthcare that I knew I would have a job every day, maybe not love it, but I would have a job, I would have money. And that's what kind of spawned the change in like what was reality for me at that point.
Yeah. I mean, I tend to think that, these early struggles, they create like grit and determination, and they make things like later in life, you're kind of grateful for them because you realize that it's they're skill sets that apply no matter what. And if it's easy early, then you never really have to like build that muscle. But you're always going to want to be able to make sure that you can push through.
Yeah, and that's something that I've learned a lot doing all these different things and how I've evolved. It was super important that you might be in a situation that sucks. And there's a lot of people that have it way worse than me. I completely understand that. But there's these things we do in life, either jobs, relationships, education, these uncomfortable places that you get that you really, in retrospect, you learn there's a lot to learn from being in a difficult spot. And it's something that I've taken a lot of pride in, even at the worst place. Obviously, you don't want to be in a job where you're treated poorly, or you don't want to be in a relationship where you're like spinning your wheels and things are just imploding and you're feeling horrible. But if you can take away some of the things, so you learn from it and you don't make those same mistakes and you can grow from that, some of the worst experiences can be the best learning tools later in life when you're doing other things. So I mean, as much as you guys, Sarah, the production assistant, she's like, "Oh, you're kind of a fatalist." When we first talked, I'm like, "Yeah, a little bit, maybe a little bit of a cynic as well." But I mean, again, it's your foundation of where you came from. I got burned a lot, so I'm very cautious about not getting burned. So I always have that like, eye on the back of my head. When's the bottom going to fall out? So yeah, it's a negative trait, but it's a survival trait as well, and I think we all have some of that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Stareable has evolved a lot over the course of 5 years, and when I think about it, I realize, well, obviously, I wish that it had been some kind of straight path. That seems better, more efficient, happier. But I guess what I now newly feel confident in is, if things are thrown in our way, I have learned how to manage them and adapt and understand where the opportunity is, and it's that I think is a more useful long-term perspective.
Especially once you get into the real world of like having a professional job. If you get to that point of or whatever job it is, or you're trying to start your own business, or you're trying to do stuff, some of these lessons are invaluable to get to that place and apply that, and also have a sense of humor. I've always had like a ridiculous sense of humor that's got me in trouble. Like even in my, like when I was in healthcare, I'd pose with the maintenance man doing stuff, and like that picture. I mean, I'd always do stupid things, and I could get away with that in my 20s, and like I learned real quick, you had to keep a leash on that stuff in certain jobs, certain positions, because you become a very polarizing personality. So it's always like that checks and balances of, knowing your place, knowing who you are, what's appropriate and not. And that's like that's really a life skill that you get after a while. But I got to meet like this guy here. This was one of the first doctor's offices I worked in. And this guy was just like a god to me. He was very, very hard to read, very kind of black and white, very cold, seemingly cold. Because he was so like focused on his job, so like type A. And I respected his ability and the respect that people had for him. But I also saw his deficiencies, that he was human. And I learned so much from this guy in order to take some of those skills that I didn't have. And I think that's kind of the point of some of that, what I'm going to make a point about with this video is, you surround yourself with all these people in jobs and work, and there's so much that you can take away from the people that you work with, the people that have that experience that you don't. And it's been so important to me to soak that up. And even if I don't take some of their skill level, I can learn at what they're good at and kind of just become a sponge for a lot of it. And as I've gone along the way, I've always tried to find a mentor or a boss or somebody that knew more than I did, and learn from them, and really try to work with them one-on-one. And that's one of the things that's kept me really engaged in jobs as well, is to have a good boss, to have a good people you work with. And as soon as that stops, I found that it's very hard to continue in certain jobs. You get lost in like the corporate environment, where people move in and out of jobs. And my best jobs are always those that I really loved the people that I worked with, that we had a mutual respect for as well. But that early life skill was good for me. That moved me kind of into the tech field. And the doctors that I worked with knew that I was more technically inclined. They kind of guided me out of the healthcare field. They're like, dude, you're going to be miserable. Just get out now. And a lot of the
Why?
guys I'd worked with were very much younger, like in their 30s. They came out of school with a lot of debt, and they were on this huge grind of just working themselves to death for not a lot of reward. And they're like, you can get in IT, you're technical, you know, get into this, go to school, you're going to be making bank. And I'm like, at 20, like 22, I'm like, oh yeah, money, cool, you know. And that's kind of what I did. They got me a job in the hospital IT department, and from there it was like full steam ahead. I spun up my own like web servers for car stuff because I was into car stuff at the time. I was hosting my own servers, had them co-located. I had people helping me with that, and that's really what spun up the whole like tech passion, is the car part and the tech part. And that's when I got my first computer. And I bought this like horrible Pentium 3 computer from Dell, and it was like, by the time I got done specking out, it was like $12,000 or something ridiculous. Wow. It had like a video capture card to video edit, because I'm like, oh, I'm gonna do car videos. And this, you know, Pentium 2, Pentium 3 days, it was like the worst experience ever trying to edit videos, but I actually got it done. I worked with like Dell tech support like every week to try to fix the problem I had with it, because I was doing stuff outside the scope of what it was really designed to do. And that is what really spawned the whole interest in like technology, computing. And I got so passionate about it. I'm like, wow, I can make a video on a computer. How is this possible? And then my buddy Greg, he's like, dude, you got to get out of your job at the hospital. He's like, he was working at Motorola, and you know, his friends were working at Motorola, and he was constantly hounding me. He's like, dude, get out of there. He's like, I can get you a job. It'll be on Easy Street. And you know, that's a picture of my first computer. I walked in the door when I was working in nursing, and that was all the boxes. That printer was probably like $700 or something for an inkjet. And I mean, I was so excited in that. I was so engaged in that time period. And then I got into, you know, setting up my desk and all that stuff. It was something else. But when I started working at Motorola, that's when it really hit that, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And how can I make this a career in technology? And of course, I still did a lot of the car stuff in the background. And I kind of phased out of like the web development stuff I'd done, the server stuff I had done, and I really focused on making that career in technology. And I moved out of that, and the, you know, Motorola days, everybody's getting laid off and moving on, and I moved into other positions, and just it kind of grew and grew and grew, to the point where I watched, I think like 10 years go by, where I'd wake up every day and I'm like, just hit a dead end. And it was something that I was fighting with myself every day with this stuff. I'm like, I hate what I'm doing. My mentality doesn't match up with the company that I'm working for. A lot of the people I worked with had completely left. My boss at the time, who I admired to death, she was sick and she wound up passing away. But she was like this workhorse person, somebody to look up to. And then it really hit me then. She's like, she spent her whole life working and then got sick and it was all over. And I think when she was gone, it really changed the way that I looked at the corporate world, what she went through, where I was going. And I realized like, okay, I just blew all my 20s and almost midway through my 30s working in a job that I have nothing to show for it. Yeah, I had things. I had the money. I had respect in the position and the positions that I was doing, but I was no longer feeling passionate about it. And my buddy Scott, who was in a lot of the videos early on, he came up with the name Turbowski. He was a mechanic, or is a mechanic, and he had been going through a lot of stuff at the time. And, you know, we started hanging out doing karting, and long story short, I'm like, hey, you want to start doing videos of us screwing around with cars? And he's like, all right, whatever. It was a way to kill time. And that was the turning point where I had this corporate job, and then I'm screwing around with cars, making videos, getting into driving. and really getting fine focused on this is what I want to do. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to take that leap. And that's really where all of this came from, was that point.
That really resonates because, I spent 10 years in finance and it feels like a lifetime ago. But the last 3 or 4 years of working in finance, I was bored. I was unsatisfied. There were the high level perks, but it just wasn't really motivating for me. And came across this idea of web series. And, if I think back 5 or 6 years ago, I had no idea that it was going to be something that was really going to kind of take over my life. Just started poking around, thinking about, well, what is this? And like, why are people not talking about all these cool projects and shows that are being made? And, having coffee with creators and things like that. But I think for me personally, I think one of the spending those 3 or 4 years being really bored and unsatisfied actually becomes valuable in that you remember what that's like. And it's a real motivator when, doing things on your own and you're inevitably going to hit roadblocks, being able to think back and go, oh, but I've had a steady thing and it was worse because I felt like I wasn't actually able to control my own destiny. So I'm in some ways I'm grateful that even though I also think like I wasted my 20s, I'm also grateful for going through that experience and like, because it's something that I think I rely on now.
Yeah, and I get it. I think it's one of those. Some people get it earlier on than others. I never got it, unfortunately, but I'm trying to make up for lost time now. And that is, like you can be a very passionate person and be really engaged what you're doing and really good at what you're doing. And what I found was you become so disposable. You're basically not disposable until you are. And a lot of the corporate culture stuff that I found, I have a clear vision of what I wanted to do and I get so much done. I get more done because I was so engaged. And at the end of the day, really the people that were helping the most were those that were working close with me, but not the upper brass, not the people, sometimes the ownership. They had no visibility on what was going on. And I felt like that's what kind of started to zap it for me is why am I spending all this heart and energy in something for somebody else? It's about, and Jack, who works with me, Jack is an engineer, a mechanical engineer, and he came out of school and he was looking to get into tech companies and things just with COVID happened. It just worst timing ever. And we started working together. And one of the things that I've tried to instill in him is stop chasing and working so hard to get things or work with people or companies that don't respect what you're doing or don't find value in what you're doing. And, it's almost like it becomes that ego thing. You're like doing this all the time. Like just, you're not putting your energy where you need to be effective. There's plenty of people that will see your value. You just have to find who those people are. You have to find the companies that want to work with you, believe in your ethos. And that's something that took me a long time to figure out. And you just get tired of fighting it. But it really started in my corporate job is just like, why am I, I didn't get it. I'm like, I'm working so hard. Why am I not seeing any rewards? And the problem was always me. It really is if you got to look yourself in the mirror and realize that you're most of the problem. And you have that power, at least I want to say in the United States, we're very lucky to have the power to make certain decisions for ourselves and change paths if we need to. It's scary though. And I've always been more scared about it than I should have been. And it's held me back a lot. But again, it goes back to the childhood. I lack stability. So I overvalued stability. Well, I still value it, but I overvalued it to a point where it held me back from taking those next steps that could have made me better. And that's and I mean, I got a whole bunch of bullet points of advice of things I've learned, but that's one of the biggest things is just don't hold yourself back sometimes. And you will be a lot freer if you don't.
Yeah. And then so you start to go down this path of making videos with your friend. How does that evolve?
So I think there's a couple parts to it. In the tech field, like working there, I had a huge relationship with Dell and my Dell reps, and in Motorola and like all these companies, they're all they care about is money. And I learned from not only the car stuff but the tech world that I had huge loyalty to brands that I had good support with. Again, it's about working with people that value what you're doing. And I had to support, so many branches. Like I think it was like 60 branches across the US at one point, thousands and thousands of users, computers, servers, and all this equipment. My job became impossible because nobody wanted to spend money. So I was doing more with less. And that's what I became really good at in my career, is doing a lot with a little. And I even apply that to my video foundation right now. But the support that I had going forward with Dell has carried me into, and I wanted to bring it up because it's real. I've worked with Dell stuff, even though it was horrible in my 20s. I've worked with it till now. I travel with my equipment. Reliability of equipment, not just the Dell stuff, but like camera stuff, cars. I'm a constant like preacher of not having disposable stuff. So I've kind of carried that over not only with my equipment, but my, again, like camera stuff. I've had the same cameras for like 4 years doing these videos, and they work. They don't ever fail. They've fallen off cars. They fly and hit stuff. I've had them fixed, and you go out -20, you go out in 120 degrees, and I can still create content. And that to me is super important. So like the tech stuff, I talk about this Dell thing and it's always in the background, but the reality is that whole experience that I've had with the IT stuff, with the infrastructure stuff, with the hardware is one of the reasons why I'm still successful in this, because they know, like Meg, I talked to Meg, she was my Dell rep for a while. Well, she still is. And, I've had these long conversations with her. And at first, when I talked to her, she's like, I don't really get where you're coming from. It sounds very salesy. But these pieces of hardware that I've made every single video on, I can go anywhere in the country. There's times where we'll travel for weeks at a time. I can still edit a video in a hotel room, which I hate. I hate, being back to back, but I can get all my work done. And I've never had one failure in 10 years of any of the equipment that I've had. And that's taken me almost a lifetime to find the stuff that works and to stick with it. So the other part of all of this is, if you're looking to do something and you're getting started, there's so much crap that you're inundated with on the internet. Like people like, oh, buy this, buy that, you should try this. And I've always been somebody that's like, don't listen to all the marketing, know what you want to do. And I think that's a huge, huge thing that people forget is you don't need a lot of money and investment to make a video these days. You don't need a ton of money to buy things, and you don't need like fancy studios and all these things that you get inundated with on Instagram and all social media. You don't need a lot of it. You just need yourself, creativity, and a lot of willpower. But you also need a good support group around you with people that you work with, the mentors, and then even like the hardware stuff. You got to have things that work. So it's this huge holistic thing that I've really embraced as I've gotten older, that has made me successful. And keeping it simple is hyper important. And that's one of my big mantras with like how I get so much stuff done the way that I am with such limited resources. I'm not saying that that's going to work for everybody, but stick with something that works and don't be jumping around a lot.
Yeah. We preach that a lot, I think, to creators when they ask, how do we get started, or what should we be focusing on? It's number one, just get started, right? We all version 1 of everything is bad, but the only way you get to version 10 is by doing version 1. And yeah, it's about having that peer group and education, and the rest of it has become so democratized, right? We have Steven Soderbergh making movies on Sundance movies on his iPhone,
right?
Versus 20 years ago when you were on this $12,000 Dell computer struggling to get it done, right? So we in some ways it's such an amazing time to be trying to create and be creative, because a lot of these things have become democratized in such an incredible way.
Yeah, technology has made things a lot easier as much as it's made things worse in a lot of ways, which is a whole different topic that I'm not going to get into. But you see this, a lot, like in the car world now. One of the reasons why I got out of tech, one of the major reasons why I got out of tech is I was tired of constantly being sold promises that never were followed through on. I'd have vendors constantly trying to hound me like, oh, try this software, we'll get you set up. And then the support fell through. And then you're stuck with $1 million piece of software that doesn't work. It constantly this way. And it wasn't just with the small companies, it was with the big ones too. And how well companies are able to support you is a huge reason why you choose their products. And I think it translates well into cars. And we're seeing that now with a lot of automotive manufacturers. You can tell right away in infrastructure and how they treat you as media, like what we're doing. Like when we come to them with a problem, how they address it with you or not address it with you shows kind of the internal structure of how they really see customer value or the importance of the customer and how they deal with it. And to me, that's hyper important. Just to give you, so it's not a vague generality. We went to an auto show. This was before COVID. And one of our reps was telling us there was a markup on one of their cars. And he's like, I love it. I love the fact that the dealers are getting $20,000 over sticker because it shows that we've made it. And to me, that was one of the most telling things, that this company did not value the consumer. They did not care about anything other than, oh my God, we finally got a product that people really want, are going to pay over sticker for, that wasn't a specialty product, that was a family vehicle. And he was just like gloating in this idea. And, you see this stuff working on the back end. And I know a lot of it's about money, these people's careers, there's people behind the products. So it's like trying to navigate through this with all these different brands and companies, and also being honest to the people that are watching a lot of these videos that we do and a lot of the work that we do, and being honest with them about some of this stuff. But you have to know your place, right? And that's one of the biggest messages that I tell Jack and I tell a lot of people that I work with is you have to know your place, because you're just one person. If I stop doing videos tomorrow, there's going to be 20 other people behind me that are just going to replace me. It's going to be here today, gone tomorrow. And I'm fully aware of that. And I'm constantly humbled by it. And if you're getting into a corporate job or you're getting into the media world, especially because it's the most disposable thing right now. There's not a lot of respect in journalism anymore. There's not a lot of respect in media. It's being humble, being appreciative of what you have, and then knowing that there's people behind these things that you have to answer to still. You can't just go and take a dump on something because you have an axe to grind. Because really, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what product it is. If we get a car and I'm like, this thing's a total piece of trash, and I'm like, and not have a really good rationale behind it and make it really inflammatory, the next day I'm going to get a call from the rep whose entire job is to support that product and manage that PR with the customers, and their bosses are going to be like, what are you doing? Why is this person saying this? Why did you give them the car? Were you involved? And then it's basically shit rolls downhill. So a lot of this is knowing how to balance relationships with people, and building a good rapport with people. And sometimes, depending on your personality type, it's going to be really hard to do that. Other times I've found that I can be very abrasive with people, but I found that being respected sometimes is better than being liked. I know a lot of the people I work with, they're like, you know what? Mark is kind of a weird guy. He's kind of like difficult sometimes to work with. And I've had emails from like brand reps that have said that. But there's still a level of respect that they know what they're going to get, that I work my ass off for stuff. And that's gotten me a long way in what I do. And it's probably one of the best pieces of advice that I can give to somebody that's getting started is work hard, show your worth, show your value, be reliable, have some ethics to you, and really believe and try to help people. And you may not, if you want $1 kajillion and run the world, that's probably not going to get you far. But in the real world, having that integrity is a vital piece to making sure that next job or next thing you get, somebody's going to remember you. Somebody's going to want you there.
Yeah, I think to me that really resonates in that, you kind of have to always have this kind of day one mentality of not resting on your laurels and feeling like there's so much work still ahead. And, sometimes I think that can feel a little bit like it's a little bit tiring, but I think it's also kind of the opportunity is, thinking about all the interesting things that you can build, haven't been given the opportunities that one has been given. And, for us, that idea of day one and like relationship building for us, we have so many like really strong relationships that took years to kind of turn into something. And I think oftentimes, especially when we're talking about, well, how does a creator get a show on the air or get a deal done, or you want the yes, right?
Right.
And what we preach a lot is, well, life is a relationship business. And so, we have a strong relationship with AMC Networks, but we met them 2 years before we ever did anything. And it was really about kind of demonstrating that we're reliable and that we have value and that they want to be a part of it. And, that it also makes sense for the things that they have ongoing. Right. And,
Right.
you sometimes it's super valuable to be able to take a step back and say, okay, what's great is that we have a conversation going, right? And we can now take this opportunity to kind of learn from each other, and there will be opportunities to work together over the long term. Maybe it's not right now, but at the very least, we can pick this up again in 6 months, 12 months, and solve problems together.
Absolutely. I know I feel like I'm rambling with some of this stuff. It's just, I don't want to sound like I'm preaching. I'm just trying to jam in a lot of content all at once. But I think really it's about, again, with the old videos that I did, I had a really solid idea of what I wanted to do with stuff. But I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know where to go with it or what the value was, right? Like anybody can pick up a phone or a camera and make a video. Anybody can go get a job or apply for a job. And you see this, especially when you're getting out of school, like you really don't have any experience. So you don't have much to show for it. And in making video content's the same way. I'd make these videos and I'd have nowhere to show them, nobody to watch them. And it became this exercise. And I think that's hyper important. Sometimes just to spend the work doing the research, learning about stuff, whether it's cars, whether it's tech stuff, whether it's cooking, whatever, try to learn as much as you can. And that's something that's really helped me, because you talked about it a bit, like the relationship part with people. The more you understand people, the more you understand their job, and then you understand your audience, the people that you are making products for, the people you're connected with. If you can understand that better, you're way more relatable than just screaming out into the sky. Everybody has an opinion. Of course, everybody has an opinion, but it's about connecting with those specific people. And that's really the main thing. You could have an average product. You can have a below average product, but if it connects with those people, you're still doing your job. So sometimes it's not just about making something. You got to make it with a purpose. And I think for my tips is you've got to know your strengths and play to your strengths. And that's something that took me a while to get to. Like, I'm very technically astute. I'm competent in most ways because I put a lot of work into it. I'm not naturally gifted in anything. I knew that at an early age. I was shitty at baseball. I couldn't play. I love basketball. I sucked at it. I get jumped over by somebody and they laugh at me, but I loved it and I would keep trying. And everything I've done was kind of like that, even with the car things. The video stuff was the same way. I was horrible. Like you said, version 1 it's so embarrassing that I would never show it to anybody. But again, it's that seat time, and it travels over into the car stuff, working on cars or driving. And that's another one, working on the video craft. How can I make a video and be technically how can I have a technical aptitude to try to explain this stuff from engineers or talk to engineers or talk about cars if I'm not good at driving? So, there's a limited amount of time, but again, it goes back to knowing your strengths and working on building those. And if I'm making a video or you're making a project for a company, you need to know that company. You need to know the people that are working there. You need to know the audience. You can't just go in and be like, okay, look how cool this looks. That's not enough anymore. So I've spent a huge majority of the video part of it, working with companies as much as I can to learn the back end, to learn the front end, to learn the people, and to become a better driver. And this isn't just an overnight thing. It's like years of work. And I still wake up and I do driving stuff, or I do, I haven't carted in a while, but when I cart, I get out there and I look at the frustration that I felt, that burning anger that I wasn't better than what I was. And sometimes it was like, I've reached the peak of what I can do. Where can I get help to be better? Can I be better? And where do you pull a cord on it and take what you get and spin it into something more positive? And that's what this whole journey for me has been about, is having all of these little areas that I'm good at and knowing where I'm good and focusing as much attention on that as possible, and then trying to grow with that. And if you're a creator or you're going into a job, I would definitely look at it that way, because there's always going to be somebody better than you. There's always going to be somebody with more money than you. There's going to be somebody that may be more pretty than you. And, the less time you spend worrying about that and worrying about what you're good at and what you can actually bring to somebody else, in this case, an audience, how can I be honest? How can I have integrity? How can I bring value that I'm not wasting their time, that they can see my passion? That is where my energy is best spent, not going over here chasing, the next car, the next thing, all of that. That's something I can always do. And that's worked for me quite well. And I can go to sleep and look at myself in the mirror when I wake up and know that I'm not fooling myself or anyone else. So huge diatribe, but I think it's super important if you're getting into this business.
No, I mean, I couldn't agree. I think it's that overlap of what are your strengths and what's the available opportunity or open space, right? The people around me are kind of tired, but I'm obsessed with this. It's called the Helsinki bus theory. Are you familiar with this?
I've heard of it. Tell me more about it, especially for the audience.
So there's, I've never been to Helsinki, but there are apparently 24 bus stations in the center of Helsinki, and if you were to get on any one of them on a bus going out of town, the first 3, 4, 5 stops, they're all the same. All the bus routes hit the same stops. And so if you were to get on a bus and realize that all the buses are going to these same stops, you'd look around and go, oh, I've gotten on the wrong bus. And so you'd turn around and go back to the center of Helsinki and you get onto another bus, and then you'd realize, oh, I'm hitting these same stops again. And it's kind of like life, where, if you want to be a painter and you start learning painting, and first you learn about the Renaissance, and then you learn about Impressionism, and then you learn about Modernism. By year 3, you look around and you go, oh, well, I know the same things as everyone else. This isn't something for me, because I haven't really differentiated myself. And so you go back to the start and you think, oh, maybe it's photography. But the reality is you have to get to that 4th stop, that 5th stop, where something starts to resonate with you and clicks with you, and you realize, oh, I have an interesting thing that I can riff off of. And I see that no one has really done that, or I think no one has done that, and I start to do it, and then I realize, oh, well, this is kind of adjacent, and that's interesting. How can I incorporate that, right? It's about kind of going deep, that the world almost opens up for you. And I think, so a lot of, I think, life becomes, just staying on the bus, continuing to grit it out and go deep until you figure out what's your own unique perspective and value add.
Yeah, that's super important. And staying the course with something that you love is probably, or love, or you have passion about something that you're really into. Sometimes you got to stay on there and you got to feed it. And it's not going to be easy work. and that's some of the best things that you do are not easy, and sometimes you question why you're doing the things that you're doing. Like this can't be right. This should not be this much work. And at least since we're talking about video stuff, some of the best stuff I've ever done was the least watched, and and this with like people that are into like the creative or artist mindset, like how can I make this masterpiece or whatever? Nobody gives a shit about it, and it's understanding like that's okay, it's okay. And like you said, staying on the bus, for me doing a lot of this, I know the way the game works. And I think a lot of people on social media know the way the game works. You look at things like TikTok, which, now we can joke around about, it's the biggest website in the world, right? And what is on TikTok? It's just a bunch of people holding their phones up, making videos. And it's exhausting to watch, to look at that constant, like disposable content where, what you put up is gone in like 3 hours, like, so you have to feed this beast. And this mindset of disposable content that people love right now is, again, like, should I be focused on that? Should I think about that? Yep. It's not my space. It's not the place where I need to be. It's not the place where I would excel. Where can I transfer my energy and stay the course on what I'm doing, but also being smart enough to know the warning signs of if it's not working. You need to listen to people. You need to take criticism. Like you need to, like the audience, especially, right? If I do something wrong, I know right away, they're going to tell me it's garbage. They're going to tell me this sucked. Why did you do this? And I need to be hyper aware of that. And with modern metrics and everything, especially like YouTube stuff, if you're on there, you can see by like the day, is what I'm doing working. And, and I've told people that I've worked with before in the past, I'm like, you got to be prepared for that rise and fall, because you might reach a level of success. And, I know we kind of, this introduction to this stuff, people are going to see these numbers and like, 500,000 subscribers or, whatever millions of views. Like, oh yeah, how did you do it? I'm like, I never even thought about it. It just happened through hard work and grinding it out, staying on that bus, to your point. I never once thought, I'm like, I got to hit 500,000 or I'm not going to be successful. I paid attention to the audience. I paid attention to the people that follow and what they want and what they're engaged in. And I'm pushing myself. I'm creating the content. I'm creating stuff that I would want to watch, that I'm proud of making. And luckily, there are people that appreciate the same things, the same information that I do. And that's where some of this success has been built up. And again, you can chase numbers. And if you're chasing numbers, you're going to be playing a whole different ballgame than what I'm talking about. There's better ways to get more followers, more numbers. And, I can tell you instantly, at least in a male-dominated field, what that's going to be. All you have to do is some basic searches to see where you get 6 million views. And again, it's about integrity. For me, it's about the integrity. It's about being true to who I am and playing the long game. And sometimes the long game is the hardest one to do.
You were talking about when we were chatting earlier this week, you mentioned, kind of opportunities opening up as a result of your work that you didn't necessarily realize. There was a story about kind of vintage cars and the impact that you've had. You want to tell the audience a little bit about that?
Yeah, and so I don't want to run that into the ground. So it's like some of the car stuff that we've done, like it was passion projects, right? Like Jack and I sit down, we're like, oh, what cars do you want to make a video on? What cars do we want to make a video on? And how do we get that done? And so, like, obviously I always wanted to do an LFA. And then you realize, what would it be like to do an LFA video? Well, we don't have the car and the car is like unobtainium. Okay, we get the car. What do we do next? Okay. You need the people that worked on it, which we didn't have that either. Where do you get the information? Okay, well, we have access to Toyota and Lexus, and then you go to them and nobody knows anything. And all the engineers and the people that have moved on, and then you get to dig into the store and you're like, holy shit, all this is a bunch of roadblocks. Like, how are we going to do it? So luckily, a passion project like that, you have to keep at it. You have to figure out a way to make it work. And eventually it comes together where you're like, where's all these trade-offs, right? How do I get this done? Maybe it's not what I envisioned, but how can I do the best story possible of what I have to work with, and making those exceptions, making those compromises while not compromising your overall, like, what you believe in. And I think the two videos that are coming up here, you have this Integra Type R. So we did the LFA video with minimal support. We had an owner of a car dealership. He was gracious enough to give us his car to drive it, to film it. But in terms of Toyota and Lexus, the only thing that they were really able to provide us was they paid to ship his car from his dealership to Autobahn Country Club, where we didn't have to have him drive it on the street, because that was his big worry. I don't want to drive this car like 3 hours and get in an accident or something. So they actually shipped it for us so we could film it on track, and that was their contribution to the video. But doing that one video, that passionate video, opened the door to, like you saw here with the Integra Type R, that yellow car. That came from Honda's museum. They're like, we have this car, and we pitched them the idea, like, look, we want to do something special with it. I did. And they agreed to ship us the car. Like, well, you can only have it for 3 days. I'm like, I need it longer for 3 days for what I want to do. And having those first couple of videos done, like the LFA video and some of the other stuff we did, they're like, okay, you had a basis to show your value, and they were willing to work with you. But again, there's a lot of compromises that need to be made there. You have mileage limitations. You're dealing with a car that now, after we did this video, when we're talking about the video, you can find them for $70,000. Now, on an identical car to the one that we just did, sold for $112,000. And some of this is like the side effect of the market. Some of it's the side effect of making these videos. The LFA video is a great example. We did a video with that guy's car, the dealership, the guy who owned the yellow one. And he contacted me immediately after the video was done, and he saw dollar signs. He's like, can you help me list it on Ring a Trailer? And the combination of having content on the car and the combination of us having this huge video became a selling point for that guy to make like $800,000 on that car. And definitely not worth it, but just knowing the cause and effect of your work. I didn't make any money on any of this, mind you. I made $0 aside from the ad revenue from putting these videos on YouTube. But I think from a business perspective, Jack's great at leveraging some of this stuff. He's like, this is what we did. Look at what we did. This is what we can bring as a value to a company or to a person, that we know we can do a good job, and we have some ethical standards to make sure that you're going to get that car back. You're going to get a good product from us that is not just going to be clickbaity, disposable stuff most of the time. And for me, I'm more focused on the creative. I stress about everything else. How do we get the content good? How do we connect with the audience? Not, and Jack's handling the stuff that I can't do. So part of it is these videos that, like these clips we're showing, this is not just happening overnight. This is constantly reproving yourself, re-showing your work. Even when you think you've done the best job possible, I could show a company like 5 videos that are like, okay, they might have 1 million views. They might be some of the best stuff on the internet for that specific car, maybe subjectively, objectively, but that's not enough sometimes. You still have to put the work in. You still have to go to them and be like, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. You can't just say, take your word for it. And that's the part of this business that from a creative perspective becomes very taxing after a while, of like, at what point is it good enough? And really the answer is it has to be good enough here and here for you. Otherwise you won't continue to have the passion to do this. It could be any job. If you're not feeling that passion, then you should be really assessing what you're doing. And that's the best advice I can give, especially on the creative side.
I love stand-up comedy, and I've heard Jerry Seinfeld in interviews say, what's the impact of, what's it like to do stand-up now versus say 30 years ago, right? And obviously he's hugely famous now. And he says, well, being famous now, the audience gives you 30 seconds. Right. So you get 30 seconds. You don't really have to prove yourself as soon as you get onto the stage. But 30 seconds in, if you're bad, they're going to be like, well, I don't really want to do this.
Right.
right? And I think that's oftentimes what it's like in with your work, is that, you know, things get easier. It's easier to get the introductions. It's easier to get opportunities. But the reality is, if the work isn't there, if you're not actually bringing the quality, and you're not actually solving for problems, it's not going to be sustainable.
No, absolutely not. You know, there's truth to that for sure. And you know, I think it's funny, and Jack and I talk about this all the time with your relevancy. You know, how relevant you are is a byproduct of just the normal cycles of life. With any form of stuff, your job, you know, let's face it, you age out in some jobs. You know, once you get into that 50 zone, you're making a lot of money. Companies want you to retire. In the media market, you got to stay fresh. Otherwise, you're out quicker than you thought you were. The entertainment industry is horrible. I mean, it's like a joke. You know, you're the women more so than the men, right? You see them like 40 years old, like, oh, we can't have a 40-year-old actress anymore. I mean, it's starting to change a little bit, but there's these waves of realities, these harsh realities in life with any job. I don't care what it is, but with this especially, like at least what we're doing, I can speak to that for sure. It's you got to be careful that you know your place and time and where you're relevant, and capitalize on that in that time before people get tired of you. You know, it's like if I did the same video every single time, or I wasn't pushing myself creatively, people would have been done in like a year. And I'm not saying what I'm doing is like the best thing ever. I know that there's way better stuff I could be doing, more skills I could bring to the table, more I could bring. And that's what I'm trying to do progressively. And I think it's working, but I'm hyper aware that this may not last. So in this time period that I have, how do I make the most of what I'm doing and really bring the most to the people that are supporting and watching this stuff? From the Patreon side, that people are literally paying me to watch, or they're just paying me because they support what I'm trying to do, or to the viewers that just watch every video because they believe in it. And I owe a lot of my work that keeps me focused on what the hell I'm doing. So like these pictures here, you have, like the last one with the gold chain, like I'm holding a gold chain and part of the B-roll next to the steering wheel. It's a joke, right? I mean, playing on the stereotypes, being hyper aware that we're still talking about cars. This is not life or death stuff. They're extraordinarily expensive objects that are relegated to like the 1%, but people are still passionate. So you have to be respectful, but still having a sense of humor is critical to doing this stuff, or any job. The more self-importance sometimes that you bake in, the worse it is. Some people really like that serious type A stuff, but really for me to survive and some of the audience to survive, there's got to be like, look, we're not curing cancer making car videos, and being hyper aware of what we're doing while still bringing value to people, helping people learn about what we're doing is really important to me personally.
Yeah.
Did you fall asleep?
No.
You fall asleep yet?
I wasn't sure. So how do you think about kind of that long term, right? So, where you've obviously you've seen a lot of success, and you've built an audience, but you're still taking that sort of like day zero, day one mentality. How do you think about kind of the long-term mentality of where you want to take this, and how do you make sure that you stay creative?
So I've never said this publicly, but I've set a timer on this, and that's 2 years from now. And and some of it is because I'm reaching that age where I am not going to be able to keep up with this pace unless I make some major changes. And I don't want to age out to the point where this dries up or fails, which it's not right now. That's why I'm kind of setting that 2-year timetable. By the time I'm in my like mid to late 40s, if I'm not where I need to be with this, and it hasn't grown out where I have support staff, and I haven't grown it out to be a little bit more scalable in terms of corporate work, supplemental income, new projects and all that, I will go back into a corporate job, because I need to focus on retirement, saving myself, like I don't want to be 60 years old and I'm like, hey, I'm on YouTube, guys, check out my car. Nobody's going to care about it when I'm 60 years old, so I have to be fully aware that what I'm doing, again, it's a life cycle. It's like a product in some ways. I still will be passionate about it, but I need to make sure that I'm going to be safe. Like I look at my own parents and my dad, he's like health decline and he's got nobody, he's got nobody with not a lot of help. And same thing with my mom. And I look at them, I'm like, they have no nest egg, they have no retirement, they have no backup plan. And the scary part is, there's a reality to that. While this is all cool in the here and now, I have a really strong sense of like, I have to protect myself. And if I can't grow this, like 2 years, when I say 2 years, it's foot to the floor. Like, how do I make this work where I can continue to do what I love, but I'm not going to be sitting, dying in the corner somewhere with no help or being kicked, being put in a corner of a nursing home. It starts to get that reality kicks in. YouTube doesn't give you retirement. They don't give you 401k. Being a creative type or sometimes being a business owner, it's tricky in terms of where you're going to get your money, especially when you have starting this late in life with like a startup and a business. Somebody's not like, oh, here's a couple million for you to stash away. You got to pay people. You got to pay taxes. You got to pay for all the overhead of expensive ass stuff. Cars are ridiculously expensive. This is a hard place to be. The equipment is expensive. So these outlays of cash are coming out of my own retirement into growing a business. And the older I get, the more scared I get of that prospect. So I have to become smarter while still being creative and doing all this other stuff. So that's, to me, the next 2 years, focus on some of these crazy videos, these corporate videos that nobody's ever done before. Like we're working on a video right now that I'm editing with Toyota. Toyota invited us into their headquarters to talk to every single engineer and every VP that was involved in designing, developing their new connected car and infotainment system. Wow. So we know from start to finish how this was made, and we're going to share with the audience like how much work goes into it. We've worked with Microsoft on how connected car works, and it's these enormous projects that we're doing with essentially 2 people that are trying to cover these things that nobody wants to talk about. And that's my passion. And I want to try to do this more over the next 2 years before I'm so burned out I don't want to do it again.
Well, that sounds like an incredible couple projects that are coming around. And I know, it's going to be interesting to, I know you're super competitive, right? We were talking about, you love to go-kart. How do you think it's going to be to apply that sort of competitiveness to, the next 2 years and kind of how you approach the next stage of your career?
I think a lot of it is the same. The go-karting thing was a great example that I wanted to bring up because I didn't get to drive when I was a kid. Like of course I drove a car because I had to, but I never had the money or the resources. My dad didn't drive. So I started driving for real, like in my late 20s, and I knew I sucked. And I was so into cars. I'm like, how can I be so into all this technical stuff and then be a shitty driver? And I pushed myself. I worked out like 5 days a week. I karted like multiple times a week. And I got to a place with this stuff where I was competing with some of the best people that I could possibly compete with in the area. Some people that went on to national championships. And then even like Scott, we were doing this together. And I got to that 1% and I was competitive with those people, but I never could break past that to that next level. I could never break into being the best at that. And I was good with it. I was good just to be in that competitive space and having the passion. And I was okay if I wasn't the best at it. And for this stuff, I've kind of changed my mindset a little bit. I want to be the best at what I can do. Like I want to make the best project, best video that I can possibly do where I'm honest about it. And that mentality of like pushing myself and like the karting or whatever it is, or, is going into every single video or every major project going forward for the next 2 years. And I know people are going to really appreciate it, and it fuels me even more to put that effort into it. But again, it's not the easiest thing, but it's way easier when you want to do it. And I'm at that place where I'm excited because I really want to do it.
Amen. This has been an amazing conversation. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I know we're running long. I mean, I guess I know some of the people that are on the creative side, not just the viewers of the channel. One thing I would say is if you're starting out and you just want to get doing this, you're out of school or whatever, and you want to get into video, start working as hard as you can in every direction you can and having something to show for it. So when you go knocking on doors or you're emailing people desperate for a job, you have something to show. You have to be like hungry for it. People are not going to give you just anything. There's 100 people behind you. So do the work, have something to show for it. Even if it's you outside filming yourself, make it good, put the attention and detail in it. Don't just shit stuff out just to shit it out. Do the work, have something to show for it, and be hungry, reliable, and have some ethics, and be a strong person to chase the dreams that you love, show some passion. It's going to get you a long way, at least to get you off the ground. And don't go bankrupt or broke on buying the latest stuff either. Just get the basics you need to get where you need to go, to have something to show for it and build on it. It's always going to be seemingly baby steps, and you're going to have patience for that. And once you get up there, you're going to look back like, man, I can't believe I did all that. And it's all about hard work. And maybe you'll get some luck along the way too, which I hope for anybody who's watching this, that there's a lot of luck involved. And I hope you have more luck than I did. You don't have to grind every single thing out.
I actually spoke too soon. We had a couple questions from the audience. One, I think is interesting, kind of thinking about that path. You know, as you think about the next bus stop, would you think about kind of moving off of a digital platform and into something that's more like traditional television? I think the specific question was, would you take a Top Gear host job?
Yeah, I mean, I know too much inside baseball with like some of the TV side of it. It would have to be a really like free and open contract, because a lot of these places, like if you got to Netflix, which is probably not going to happen, but even if you did, they want to own you. They want to own your content, which is very difficult. It would have to be a really stable long-term thing, not just like a one-season gig. And a lot of times doing some of the TV means you have to stop what you're doing, right? So everything I've built up, I would have to put on the side to chase something else. And most of the people that I've seen that have gone into that, they basically have to scrap everything that they've done on the side. And I'm not in a place to do that. I don't want to just I don't want somebody else to reap the rewards of all the work that I've put in for myself at this point. Maybe I'll get there, but it's not today.
Some other questions about how you found your teammates and collaborators, and Jack specifically, but also one question. Mark, are you looking for additional staff? I'll gladly follow your footsteps and switch from back-end dev to your assistant. The only thing is that I don't like Arby's, but I'm going bald as well.
Well, you just ruled yourself out. We need a full head of hair, and we need somebody that can bring me my Arby's every day. Yes, I've been trying to find interns for editing for a while. I went through 3 editors, and not really to say anything bad about them. It's just, it costs a lot of money to get somebody good. And I have a number in mind, but it's like, you look at a lot of the interns out of school, most of the people in the film schools in Chicago, they're not diversified out. Like, most everybody wants to be behind a camera and a cinematographer, like, that's great, but I need somebody that can do everything, that wants to do more than just record video. I need somebody that can edit, to be part of the creative process, that has attention to detail. And it's really hard to do that. And when you start looking for more of a seasoned professional, they need more than just like, they're not going to live off like $2,000 a month. They need benefits, they need all that. So it's harder when you're in a place where I'm at, where I'm trying to grow, but I don't have a ton of money to be bringing on like, 10 head count or something. So that's something that I'm working on right now. And it's part of the business, running a business, right? Which, I'm not going to kill any more time with that part. How did I meet Jack? Jack messaged me on the FT86 forums, which is a car forum for the FRS BRZ back in 2013. We both had the same car, and he moved back to the area, and he just messaged me out of the blue. He's like, "Oh, I see you're local, maybe we should hang out." And I'm like, "Okay, whatever." And I just kind of like, I never meet up with anybody on the internet, but he followed up again. And then I saw his car parked somewhere where I'm at locally. I'm like, I wonder if it's that guy. And then because we're similar personality types, we're kind of like, we were in and out of each other's life a little bit. And then there's a big age gap there too, which really didn't help at the time. But it was just like, we kept popping back up in each other's life. And he's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" We're both like only children. So we're kind of like weird like that, disconnected a bit or careful about how much we open up. But I mean, literally it went from really nothing to we're like in each other's life every day. I mean, it's crazy where it's transitioned. I would have never predicted it. It was very organic too.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's often what it's like to piece together a startup team, right? It's you're kind of you're pulling it from the people that you know and have shared interests and that you trust and are willing to take this leap with you.
And Jack, I wasn't doing this when we first met. I was just screwing around with cars. So he didn't contact me because I was doing SavageGeese. He just contacted me because we had the same car. But when I started doing it, the one thing that really struck me about Jack, and it's extremely rare when you meet people, he is like one of the hardest workers I've ever met in my life. He is like dedicated to a fault, like for himself, a fault. And I've never met somebody that actually has more work ethic and passion about getting the work done as Jack is. And it pushes me harder to the point of like a breaking point where I'll get like sick mentally from pushing myself so hard. But again, it's, what do you want? You can't complain. Like, do you want some deadbeat who doesn't do shit? Or do you want somebody that like pushes you? And again, that's part of this as well, as I've learned going along.
Awesome. I think that's it for the questions. Mark, thank you again for this incredible conversation. I hope you had a good time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. And thanks for doing this. I appreciate it. And good luck. And thanks to everybody for watching this. And regardless of where you're at in your life, I hope that you are happy in whatever pursuits you have.
Thank you again to Mark Sano of SavageGeese Media for such a great presentation. We really appreciate him sharing his wealth of knowledge and experience and the twists and turns of his career. We know it's not an easy experience building an audience and crafting a career as a digital creator. So we hope his experiences and learnings have helped light a path for the folks watching. Now, we're excited to announce our official selections for Stareable Fest LA 2022. Before we get started, I want to emphasize how amazing all of our submissions were this year. That we've seen such creativity, production value, innovation, and execution during what has been a truly difficult and abnormal period. Really speaks to the talent that we have in our midst. And I just want to take a moment to congratulate all of you. And now, the moment we've been waiting for, Stareable Fest LA 2022's official selections. Animals. Arthur. Deer Frontier. Black Kung Fu Chip. Blur, a Humac story. Chiquis. Cray. Death Doula. Discontent. Dog Walk. Early to Rise. Farm Crime. Girl Night Stand, Grading Animals with JCat, Imposters, Incognita's Infamous Adventures, Juliet, Mas Latino, Privileged, Russian Cyberpunk Farm, Serian Breton, The Tall Bike Joust, This Is Not a Hotel, Viral, You Look Happy. A big congratulations to all of our selections. Thank you to all of you for joining us, participating in the questions, and just being a part of this incredible community of creators. Thank you again to Dell Technologies, NVIDIA, and Intel for presenting Cafe Stareable. We'll be posting Cafe Stareable on YouTube and Facebook in the coming days. Please follow us across our social channels at Stareable to make sure you get the latest updates from us. Stareable Fest LA 2022 will be in late April. We'll be announcing our programming lineup, ticket availability in the coming weeks. Please stay tuned. We will also shortly be opening for submissions for Stareable Fest New York City 2022. Don't miss your opportunity to land the conversation that unlocks everything. Have a great day, everyone.